Ever left a family gathering early just to protect your peace?
My cousin Melanie once told me, without blinking and in front of the whole family, that I sucked the joy out of every room and that I was simply too emotionally draining to be part of the New Year's celebration this year. A party I had not only helped organize in the past, but also quietly paid for more than once, including covering catering when our Uncle Doug's card got declined 2 years back, and yet somehow, this time around, I wasn't even worth a phone call. Just a snide message in. The family group chat delivered 2 days before the event, after I'd already bought gifts and shipped a box of wine from Napa. With Melanie's stupid smiling sunflower emoji at the end of her sentence, like she was offering me some kind of spiritual mercy instead of an insult. I was sitting at my kitchen table with one slipper half on, reading the message over again, trying to make sense of it, like maybe the punctuation would shift and give me a loophole, but no, it was clear, unmistakable. We just want to keep things light and happy this year, Heather. No heavy topics, no energy drains. Hope you understand. I don't know if it was the passive-aggressive tone, the fake warmth, or the way she lumped me in with the concept of bad energy, but something in me broke, not in a tragic, sobbing on the floor kind of way, but in a hard, still silence that felt like a switch had flipped, and the lights were finally on for the first time in years. The thing is, I've never really been the one anyone worries about. I'm the dependable cousin, the no-nonsense older one with a real job, the one who always shows up early to help set up chairs and stays late to clean up plates while Melanie poses with her champagne flute, claiming credit for setting the vibe. I've been that woman my whole life, the reliable one, the fixer, the invisible support beam holding up everyone else's emotional weight while being told I'm just too serious, too negative, too much. But this time, something shifted. I stared at that message, then at the photo she'd posted 5 minutes later of her and Erica, my own sister, clinking glasses and smiling in her living room with a caption that read, "Let's start the year with people who lift you," and I swear to God, I didn't feel sad. I felt cold, calm, detached in the way someone feels right before they make a decision they won't unmake. For the first time in decades, I realized something painfully obvious. I didn't have to keep doing this. I didn't have to keep playing my role, the one they'd quietly assigned me, the workhorse, the backup, the ATM with a quiet face and a strong stomach. Melanie had been living in an apartment she couldn't afford, on a lease I was co-signing. She'd been working freelance gigs I helped her land through my business contacts. I had strings in her life, real strings, and for years I never tugged on them, not even when she bragged about being self-made. Not even when she forgot to send rent 3 months in a row and swore it was a bank thing. But sitting at my kitchen table that night, with her words still echoing in my head and a bottle of wine breathing on the counter, I finally saw it for what it was, not just disrespect, but contempt. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me small. They wanted me gone until they needed something again. And so I did the unthinkable. Not with a scream or a sob or a dramatic phone call, but with a quiet resolve. I stood up, turned off the oven I'd been roasting sweet potatoes to bring to the party, the irony not lost on me, and poured myself a glass of that expensive Merlot I'd meant to gift Melanie. I opened my laptop, pulled up the rental agreement, and bookmarked the clause about co-signer withdrawal. Then I opened my email and searched Freelance Melanie. For results came up. All active contracts I'd vouched for. I didn't cancel anything that night, not yet. But I made a list. I made a damn good list. But let me ask you something, because maybe I'm not seeing this right. Maybe I'm too close to it. Maybe I am too negative. If someone's been helping you quietly for years, not out of obligation, not for recognition, just because they care, and you decide to cut them out of your life like a tumor, don't you owe them more than a group chat message? Don't you owe them a phone call? A real explanation? Or is that just how people are now, good vibes only, as a license to dump anyone who makes them feel uncomfortable, even if that person is the reason their bills are paid? New Year's Eve came and went. I didn't go to the party. Of course not. I sat in my apartment alone with a perfectly good bottle of Cabernet, a candle flickering on my mantle, and my phone lighting up every 10 minutes with pictures from that stupid party, Melanie in sequins, Erica holding sparklers, my Uncle Doug trying to dance in socks. It didn't hurt like I thought it would. It felt clean. Like watching people I used to care about from behind glass. I didn't reply to a single message. I just took a deep breath, opened my planner, and circled January 3rd. That's when the first rent payment for the new year was due on Melanie's apartment. That was when she'd start to feel it. Because here's the thing about being the negative one in the family, we may not be sparkly or charming, and maybe we don't bring the warmest energy into the room, but we see things. We remember. We hold the receipts. And if you decide to cut us out like dead weight, you better pray we don't finally decide to let you fall. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I just turned off my phone at midnight, finished my wine, and whispered one word to the room, okay. When I woke up on the first morning of the new year, there was a strange stillness in the air, the kind that follows an emotional storm but precedes a more deliberate one, and as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, slow and steady like it knew something I didn't, I felt an almost physical weight pressing into my chest, not from grief or second thoughts, but from the sheer realization that for the first time in years, I wasn't going to talk myself out of doing what I already knew I had every right to do. It wasn't even about revenge. Not really. At least not in the typical way people throw that word around like it's dramatic or messy or emotional. This was something different, cleaner, sharper, more like accountability with a quiet razor's edge. And it had been sitting in my pocket for years, waiting for a moment like this. You see, what most people don't realize, especially people like Melanie, who coast through life on charm and curated chaos, expecting others to pick up the slack while pretending they're doing it all themselves, is that everything in life, especially in family, runs on a kind of unspoken contract. Give a little, take a little, stay in balance, show up, say thank you, and for God's sake, don't bite the hand that's feeding you while you're still chewing the damn food. And Melanie? She'd been gnawing on my goodwill like it was a buffet, all while pretending she never knew where the meal came from. By mid-morning, I was fully dressed, no makeup, hair in a knot, and sitting in front of my laptop with a mug of lukewarm coffee I wasn't even drinking, just holding like a prop in a scene where the quiet woman finally stops being quiet. I opened my email and went straight to the folder marked Melanie. Freelance, which contained every invoice, contract, and introduction I'd put together for her over the past 18 months. Projects she had only landed because I vouched for her with my name and reputation, because when she called me crying at the beginning of the pandemic saying she was scared and broke and didn't know what to do, I didn't hesitate. I called in favors. I wrote glowing referrals. I convinced 2 of my long-term clients that she was talented, that she just needed a chance, that she was reliable and sharp and worth their trust, words I believed at the time, or at least wanted to believe, because she was family. And when you're the eldest daughter type in any family, you carry that weight whether anyone asks you to or not. The first call I made was to Lisa, my contact at a mid-size marketing agency in Portland, a woman I had worked with for over 10 years, someone who never needed much context when I called because she knew I wasn't in the habit of wasting time or breath. I told her, carefully and without a trace of drama, that I was withdrawing my recommendation for Melanie as a freelance contributor moving forward, and I apologized for the lack of notice, but explained, honestly, that I could no longer in good conscience associate myself with her work. Lisa was quiet for a moment. And then she said, very calmly, "You're not the first person to say that this month," which told me more than I expected. It wasn't just me. Melanie's cracks had already started to show. I just hadn't been looking closely enough. Next was the real estate paperwork, a lease I'd co-signed for Melanie's overpriced one-bedroom apartment downtown, a lease she absolutely couldn't afford on her own. Not with her inconsistent work history and her luxury taste in everything from furniture to imported candles. I pulled up the digital agreement and read every line 3 times, finally landing on the clause about co-signer withdrawal after the initial 12-month period, which had just passed in December. With a few clicks, I filed the notice. It wasn't immediate. The management company would take a couple of weeks to process, but it was done. The rope she'd been swinging on had started to fray. I could have done more, honestly. I could have emailed all 3 of her active clients and attached screenshots of the snide text message she'd sent me, Or the Instagram posts where she shaded me without saying my name, claiming to be surrounded by toxic people who drain her light, but I didn't. I wasn't trying to blow up her world. I was just stepping back and letting the scaffolding collapse under its own weight, the same scaffolding I had built piece by piece while she smiled for pictures and told everyone she'd done it all herself. What I did next was the quietest part of it all, and maybe the most satisfying. I turned off my phone, not just silencing it or muting notifications, but powering it down completely and placing it face down in the drawer of my nightstand like I was burying a body. For the first time in years, there would be no "Happy New Year" messages from me, no emergency support, no advice calls, no cash apps at midnight asking for gas money or rent coverage, no quietly cleaning up the chaos Melanie left in her wake while she floated on her self-image of being the family's favorite. I wasn't going to explain myself. I wasn't going to warn her. I wasn't going to give her the luxury of an emotional confrontation where she could cry and twist and manipulate and walk away looking like the victim. I was simply and finally done. And as I sat there in the stillness, watching the light change on the wall as the day moved on without me, I thought not about whether what I'd done was harsh or petty or cruel, but about how long I had waited to do it. How many years I'd allowed myself to believe that keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. How many times I swallowed resentment like it was medicine and told myself it was just how families work. But families, I've come to realize, are only as sacred as the people inside them, and when one of those people shows you over and over that they see you not as family, but as a utility, a stepping stone, a bank account, a human doormat with a sympathetic smile, you're allowed, at some point, to stop playing along. I knew the fallout would come. I knew Melanie would notice within hours, the lease notice would trigger a payment flag, the contract terminations would hit her inbox like an ambush, and she would call me in a panic, maybe even cry, maybe even try to weaponize guilt in that syrupy voice she used whenever she wanted something. But I also knew I wouldn't answer. I wouldn't hear it. I wouldn't be there. The phone was off. The rope was cut. And as far as I was concerned, the next move was hers, and whatever that move turned out to be, I was ready. By the time I turned my phone back on, nearly 48 hours had passed since I'd set everything in motion, and I will admit, there was a brief flicker of hesitation, an instinct, almost muscle memory, that whispered I should brace for impact. As though I'd be met with some kind of volcanic eruption of calls and messages that would knock me off my axis. But what actually happened wasn't explosive at all. It was messier, smaller, more desperate in a way that caught me off guard, not because I didn't expect panic, but because I hadn't anticipated just how quickly Melanie would unravel the moment she realized I had finally pulled away the one thing she'd taken for granted since the beginning, my silence. The phone lit up with a storm of missed calls, 32 to be exact, along with voicemails, texts, and even a few WhatsApp messages, which made me laugh out loud, because if someone is reaching you on WhatsApp in 2025, they are absolutely spiraling. I sat there on the edge of my bed, still in pajamas, cradling my phone like it was an artifact from another life, scrolling through the flood of digital noise without opening any one thing just yet, letting the chaos swirl on the surface while I stayed beneath it, unmoved, watching it all with a kind of detached curiosity, the same way you might observe a fire you started on purpose, not because you're cruel, but because you finally stopped pretending the house wasn't already burning. There were messages from Erica, of course, and Uncle Doug, and even one from Melanie's roommate, a girl named Tasha I'd only met once, but who apparently thought it appropriate to send me a paragraph that began with, "Hey, not trying to get involved but," and then promptly got involved by accusing me of putting Melanie in a really tough spot. I didn't respond. Not to her. Not to any of them. Eventually, I tapped into the voicemail box, which had 6 recordings, though 3 were hang-ups, probably calls Melanie made while pacing, unsure what she'd say if I picked up. The 4th message was from Uncle Doug, his voice soft, cautious, the kind of tone people use when they're trying to smooth things over without actually taking a side, which was his specialty. He said he didn't know what had happened, just that Melanie was very upset, and that maybe I should reach out, talk things through, try not to hold on to grudges in a new year. That was classic Doug, vaguely disappointed in me for creating waves, even though he never once asked where those waves came from. But it was the fifth message, Melanie's voice, that stopped me cold. I hit play, expecting some version of the performance I'd seen before, maybe a teary apology laced with backhanded comments, or a defensive tantrum disguised as concern, but what I heard was something worse. It was a script. A cold, calculated attempt to flip the narrative before it even had time to take shape. Her voice was trembling, but not from sadness. It was too measured, too deliberate, as if she'd practiced the lines in front of a mirror. "Heather," she began, "I don't know what's going on, but I'm really confused and hurt right now. I thought we had an understanding. I've always appreciated your help, and I know I haven't said it enough, but you've been like a big sister to me. That's why it's so hard to understand why you'd do something like this without even talking to me. You cut off my lease, my clients are saying you pulled your support, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out what I did that was so awful to deserve this. I know we've had our differences, but this just feels cruel. You could have said something. You didn't have to do it this way." I listened to it twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because the first time I was too stunned by the sheer gall of it all to catch the subtleties, the way she framed my actions as emotional violence, the way she buried her manipulation beneath a layer of victimhood so thick it would have fooled anyone who hadn't lived through her particular brand of passive cruelty. And in that moment, I felt it again, not guilt, but that familiar pull, the one that had kept me quiet for so long, that whisper in my chest telling me, maybe this is too much. Maybe you're overreacting. But I pushed it down, forced it into the background, and reminded myself of everything I'd tolerated. Every time she'd forgotten rent. Every job she got through me and never even sent a thank you text. Every snide comment she made at family dinners about my tense energy or career woman sadness, while taking another bite of food I paid for. Still, part of me couldn't let it go without at least showing someone else the truth, not because I needed validation, but because I wanted at least one person in the family to see the full picture before the lies started circulating like they always did. So I did something impulsive, which isn't my nature at all. I forwarded the voicemail to Erica, along with a screenshot of Melanie's group text message from before New Year's, the one that had kicked this all off, and I didn't say anything else. No explanation, no summary, just the raw materials and the space to interpret them. Erica called me 10 minutes later, her voice flat, tired, not angry but not neutral either, and she said, "She's freaking out. She's calling everyone. She told Uncle Doug you're trying to destroy her career." I laughed, not bitterly but with that kind of exhausted disbelief that comes when someone takes your restraint as malice. Erica sighed and said, "You know how she is. But I get it. I really do. I'm just asking if you're done now. If maybe it's enough." I didn't answer her right away, not because I didn't have a response, but because her question sat in my gut like a stone, and it took me a moment to realize what she was really asking. Not, "Have you done enough damage?" but, "Are you finally going to stop holding people accountable for how they treat you?" That was the subtext. That was always the subtext with my family. Heather is the strong one, the steady one, the one who keeps her mouth shut and makes things work, so when she stops, the machine breaks, and instead of asking why she finally snapped, they ask her to fix it again. So I told her, calmly, I'm not out for blood. I'm just not paying the bill anymore, for any of it. She didn't like that. I could hear it in the silence that followed, the way she was biting her lip or picking at a cuticle the way she always did when she wanted to say something but didn't want to start a fight. I didn't give her a chance. I said I need space, and then I hung up. I knew that wasn't the end of it. I knew Melanie wasn't going to let this go quietly. But I also knew I wasn't going back, not this time. Not after everything. And especially not after that message, that pitiful little monologue that dripped with fake concern and unspoken entitlement, because let's be honest, what she really wanted to say was, "You owe me." But she couldn't say that out loud, because then she'd have to admit she never stood on her own. Not once, not ever. So I let the silence hang, and I didn't answer the next call, or the one after that. And I told myself that no matter what came next, I wouldn't explain myself again. Let them write their versions of the story. I know mine. I know what she did. And more importantly, I know what I finally stopped doing. There's a certain brand of performance that people like Melanie have perfected so thoroughly it almost passes for sincerity if you don't know the history behind it. A delicate, curated balance of fragility and false humility wrapped in the language of self-care and trauma buzzwords, where every selfish choice is reframed as an act of protecting energy, and every consequence that finally catches up to them is cast as an attack from a bitter outsider, not the inevitable result of years spent stepping over boundaries like they were merely suggestions. And what's wild is that it works, not on everyone, of course, but on just enough people to keep the illusion intact, to preserve that carefully polished image of her as the glowing, effortlessly likable sunshine girl who only ever wants harmony, who just loves big and feels deeply and somehow always ends up crying in the middle of the conflict she lit the match for. I wasn't surprised when, 2 days after I hung up on Erica and once again silenced my phone, I got a LinkedIn message from someone I hadn't thought about in at least a year, Travis, Melanie's ex-boyfriend. The one she dated for about 9 months during the pandemic, back when she was still living with our aunt and posting wellness quotes about boundaries while sending me 10 Venmo requests a month for things like art supplies and emergency smoothies. I remembered Travis as being quiet, maybe a little awkward, the kind of guy who stayed too long in relationships where he wasn't valued because he still thought love had to hurt a little to count. He and I had spoken briefly at Thanksgiving once, the same Thanksgiving where Melanie called my stuffing aggressively beige and asked, in front of everyone, if I'd ever thought about smiling more, which drew laughter from the table and a fake apology text later that night that said, "You know I love you, but seriously, lighten up." Travis's message was short, but it cut cleanly through the fog I'd been sitting in. He said, "I heard what happened. You're not the only one she's used. Let me know if you ever want to talk." At first, I just stared at it, unsure whether to respond at all. Part of me didn't want to open that door, didn't want to start gathering allies like I was building a case, because I wasn't looking for validation. I knew what Melanie had done, and I didn't need anyone else to co-sign that reality. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that hearing someone else speak the truth out loud, especially someone who'd been tangled up in the same emotional mess, might actually offer something I hadn't let myself want: clarity. So I replied. I said, "I've got time. Let's talk." We met at a small, underlit coffee shop in an older part of town where the walls were lined with dusty books and the tables didn't match, the kind of place that felt like it couldn't be infiltrated by the polished Instagram aesthetic Melanie preferred. And as soon as Travis walked in, I could tell he carried the same weight I did, not anger exactly, but a tiredness, a sort of internal bruising you only get from being slowly drained over time by someone who convinced you it was love. We sat across from each other, both nursing lukewarm coffee neither of us really touched, and after a few minutes of surface-level chatter, he said, "She used your name for everything, didn't she?" I nodded. "She bragged about you constantly," he continued, but not in a proud way, more like she kept you in her pocket as a backup plan. She told people her cousin was in corporate, that she had a safety net, that she could take risks because she had someone who'd catch her if she fell. He went on to tell me that Melanie had even used my position to bluff her way into meetings with potential clients, implying connections she didn't actually have, name-dropping me as if I were a mentor instead of someone she occasionally remembered to thank in vague Instagram captions when her rent cleared. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The real blow came when Travis told me that during their relationship, Melanie had been preparing documents for a joint visa application under the pretense of engagement, not because she loved him, but because she wanted to keep her options open for European work contracts and thought a dual citizenship situation might be convenient. When he found out, she gaslighted him for weeks, accusing him of being paranoid and insecure, until he finally walked out with nothing but a backpack and a sense that maybe he'd imagined the whole thing. By the end of the conversation, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in weeks, not just anger or vindication, but freedom, because hearing those words from someone else, someone who had no reason to lie, confirmed what I had been too careful to fully admit to myself. Melanie wasn't just careless or immature or oblivious to how her actions affected people, she was calculated. She knew exactly where her power was, and she used it shamelessly until someone pushed back. And when they did, she crumbled, not from pain, but from the sudden loss of control. Later that night, sitting in my living room with the lights off and the soft hum of the dishwasher in the background, I opened a blank email draft and stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. I wasn't planning to send it to Melanie. She didn't deserve that. No, this one was for the family group chat, the same one where she'd so casually disinvited me like I was a stain on her perfectly curated holiday. And I wasn't going to scream or accuse or drag every skeleton out of the closet, because I knew how that would play. I'd be the bitter, lonely woman lashing out, and she'd twist it all into a redemption arc about forgiveness and healing. So I wrote something simple, measured, but firm. I told them that I wouldn't be attending any future gatherings organized by Melanie, nor would I be providing financial support, logistical help, or emotional labor of any kind going forward. I reminded them that for years, I had supported her not because I owed her anything, but because I believed in giving without expectation, and that clearly, my silence had been mistaken for consent. I told them I was fine, I was not angry, I did not need rescuing, but I was done. And I closed the message with a single line that hung in the digital air long after I hit send. You wanted good vibes only? Congratulations. You're free of mine. And of my money. Then I turned my phone off again. Not forever, just long enough for the silence to settle, for the absence to echo louder than any words I could have spoken in a room full of people who only ever saw me when they needed something. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say to someone who never thought you'd leave is nothing at all. By the second week of January, when the holiday lights were coming down across the neighborhood and those hollow New Year, New Me declarations were already starting to decay under the weight of old habits, my apartment had taken on a kind of quiet that didn't feel empty or lonely, but rather something sturdier, something closer to peace than I'd ever experienced within the echo chamber of my family. And every morning that I woke up without a string of passive-aggressive texts waiting for me, without a guilt-laced voicemail or a dramatic sigh on the other end of a reluctant call, I felt like I was regaining some lost part of myself. A version that had been quietly suffocating under the weight of obligations that were never really mine to carry in the first place. The silence was, at first, disorienting in the way a body reacts to withdrawing from something it had learned to depend on, even if that thing was toxic, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, it became something I didn't just tolerate but craved, a space where I could breathe without looking over my shoulder, where I didn't have to brace myself for the next emotional bill arriving disguised as a family favor. Melanie, as expected, had not gone quietly, though she had shifted tactics in a way that would have almost impressed me if I weren't so thoroughly exhausted by her repertoire of manipulation. After the initial storm of voicemails and text messages went unanswered and her professional scaffolding began to shake beneath her, she pivoted, predictably, from outrage to performative vulnerability. Posting a string of vague but pointed messages across her social media accounts, carefully crafted to cast herself as the misunderstood empath, the creative soul tormented by betrayal, the sensitive younger cousin wronged by the bitter cynicism of people who never healed. One photo, which Erica sent me in a moment of frustrated loyalty, showed Melanie curled on her couch, face turned toward a rain-drenched window, with a caption that read, "Sometimes the ones you thought would protect you are the ones who leave the deepest scars." And though I didn't bother replying, didn't even let Erica know I'd seen it, I couldn't help but marvel at the audacity of it, how she twisted absence into abuse, how she spun accountability into cruelty. How she managed to make herself the center of a drama I had exited with nothing more than silence and a handful of revoked support. It was around that same time that Erica started sending what I can only describe as digital olive branches, not direct apologies, but small, cautious gestures intended to bridge the chasm without fully acknowledging how it had been carved. First, she sent a meme that made a quiet joke about family drama, then a photo of our childhood dog she'd found in an old box. Then, finally, a voice message that began with a long sigh and the words, "I know you probably don't want to hear this, but," followed by an uneven attempt to explain how hard it was to be in the middle, how she understood why I did what I did, how she wasn't taking sides, even though by refusing to choose she had, in effect, already made her choice. Her voice cracked near the end when she said, "This can't be forever. She's still your cousin. We're still family." And I sat with that sentence for a long time, letting it circle the room like smoke that refused to dissipate, wondering what still family even meant in a context where family had been used as a leash, where love had been transactional, where silence had been mistaken for unity. Because here's the uncomfortable truth no one ever wants to say out loud at the dinner table, the thing that gets stuck in your throat when you've grown up in a house that treated conflict like an unforgivable sin. Family is not immunity. It is not a free pass for bad behavior. It is not a get-out-of-consequence card you get to wave every time someone finally decides they've had enough. Family can be beautiful, yes, and sacred, and deeply grounding, but it can also be weaponized, manipulated, and distorted until it becomes a cage you willingly step into just to make everyone else more comfortable. And once you realize that, once the door swings open and you see the bars for what they are, you can't unsee it. You can't go back. You can't pretend the cage was a sanctuary. I didn't respond to Erica, not because I was angry, but because I was still in the process of learning how to live outside that cage, how to resist the pull of guilt that had been my compass for so long it had started to feel like a moral compass, when in fact it was just a leash. Instead, I took long walks in the mornings before the sun came up, drank my coffee slowly, allowed the silence of my phone to feel like presence rather than absence, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a version of myself that made them more comfortable. Of course, there were moments where doubt slipped in through the cracks, quiet evenings when I found myself scrolling through old photos, or mornings when I instinctively reached for my phone to check a group chat that no longer buzzed with holiday plans or passive commentary. And yes, I still checked Melanie's social media every now and then, though I never admitted that to anyone, not even myself really, justifying it as curiosity rather than need. One particular video stuck with me, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. She was sitting on a park bench, wrapped in a blanket, speaking softly to the camera about toxic people and healing from betrayal, her voice trembling in carefully spaced intervals. And though the comments were full of sympathy from strangers who had no context, who had only seen the performance and not the years behind it, there were a few, just a few, that said things like, "This sounds a little one-sided," or "Maybe look in the mirror." And I'd be lying if I said that didn't bring a quiet satisfaction, not because I wanted to see her suffer, but because it confirmed something I needed to believe. Not everyone bought it. Not everyone was fooled. In the final days of January, Erica called again. I didn't pick up. She left a message that was shorter this time, simpler. She just said, "You made your point." She knows she messed up. But this can't be forever. Can it? And I sat there, staring at the blinking voicemail icon, and thought about how often forever gets thrown around in families like a threat, like a curse, like a promise we're all supposed to honor no matter how many times it breaks us. I didn't respond. Not right away. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I honestly didn't know the answer. Maybe it couldn't be forever. Or maybe, for the first time, it could be just long enough for me to feel what it's like to live on my own terms. And if Melanie ever does call me again, and I suspect, one day, she will, I honestly don't know if I'll pick up. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Maybe by then, the silence will feel too precious to break. Or maybe I'll have something to say. But today, I like the quiet.